There is no question that the Cleveland Browns are one of my favorite punching bags and the favorite punching bags of a lot of NFL fans. And frankly, they have earned that right, so to speak, especially since they came back into being as an organization starting in 1999. But a lot of lean years for Cleveland Browns fans, a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration. But that even goes back to the old Cleveland Browns franchise, the teams under Retigliano, the teams under Schottenheimer. Heartbreak and disappointment and so close yet so far kind of became a mantra and a way of being for those Browns teams and that organization during that time period. But it wasn't always the case for Cleveland. It wasn't always the case for the Browns. There was a point in time where this was one of the crown jewel franchises of the NFL, one of the best run franchises in all of the NFL, and one of the real marquee franchises that everybody looked up to and wanted to emulate in all of the National Football League. Between their time in the AAFC and then when they transitioned in the NFL from 1946, their first year of existence, to 1955, the Cleveland Browns in those 10 seasons played in a total of 10. That's 5, 5, 10 season-ending world championship games, if you will, a total of 10. So every year they were playing in the championship game. Imagine that today. You think about the Buffalo Bills making it to 4 straight Super Bowls. Imagine them making it to 10 and how incredibly difficult that would be. That's what the Browns did between 46 and 55. Incredible. Multiple world championships going way back into their history. Like I said, this once was a very proud, very storied franchise that was one of the crown jewels of all the National Football League. And they've had some great players throughout their history. I think about some of the Hall of Famers that didn't even make my top 5 list. The guys like the Bill Willises, the Ozzie Newsomes, the Len Fords, the Mike McCormicks, the Gene Hickersons, Paul Warfields, Dante Lavellis, the Frank Gatskys of the world. These are some great players that in a lot of other organizations would be on those top 5 lists. A couple of them might be even number 1 or number 2, but not here, not for the Cleveland Browns, a team that's, again, has had a lot of great history and tradition and a lot of great players throughout their history. But when it came down to it, I thought there were 5 guys that really stood above the rest. So let me talk now about the 5 greatest Cleveland Browns in the history of the organization. I start off at number 5 with a fullback that went by the name of Marion Motley, that during his 8 years in the NFL and the AAFC, became really the gold standard of fullbacks and was one of the truly great all-around players of his time. This was a guy that could run the ball with speed and power. He was bigger than damn near everybody else that played at that time, including the linemen. This was a guy that was equally adept as a pass catcher out of the backfield. This was a guy that was also a tremendous run and pass protector as a blocker. He could literally do it all. This was a 4-time All AAFC player, a 1-time NFL Pro Bowler, a 1-time NFL First Team All Pro, a member of the 1940s NFL All Decade Team, a member of the NFL 75th Anniversary Team. Still to this day, widely viewed and thought of as one of the greatest fullbacks in the history of the organization. Funny thing is, in the history of the NFL. Funny thing is, he's not even the greatest fullback in the history of the Cleveland Browns organization, but more on that in a couple of moments. But even more significantly, Marion Motley had a huge historical impact on the National Football League. He helped break down walls. He helped break down barriers. Most importantly, the color barrier of professional football. Yeah, you had the Fritz Pollards and the Jim Thorpes way, way back in the day. But in terms of when he got to the 40s, Marion Motley really helped, change the league. He helped change professional football. And that, again, is something that I think can't be forgotten about and can't be dismissed. And when you look at all that, all the championship teams that he was a part of, the fact that he was one of the greatest fullbacks of all time and is still viewed so even to this day, and that he also is, such an important historical figure in the history of the NFL, I think there's no question that he belongs on this list. Number 4. How do you replace an all-time great ball carrier like a Jim Brown? By drafting another Hall of Famer. And I'm talking, of course, about Leroy Kelly, who played for the organization from 1964 to 1973. In his 10 seasons, he very adeptly filled in the big, big shoes and the big, big hole that a Jim Brown not being there left. A 6-time Pro Bowler, a 3-time First Team All Pro. He had 3 1,000-yard rushing seasons at a time where 1,000-yard rushing seasons were very difficult to get with 12 and 14 game seasons. This guy had 3 of them. That meant something back then. He was a 2-time league leader in rushing yards, a 3-time league leader in touchdowns. The 1968 NFL Most Valuable Player, a member of the 1960s NFL All-Decade Team, a member of that 1964 Cleveland Browns championship team. Again, when you look at a Leroy Kelly, he, in a lot of other organizations, would be the greatest running back, greatest ball carrier of all time. He just isn't in the case of the Cleveland Browns, but still a tremendous player, a player that it took far too long. It took until 1994 for him to gain induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but truly one of the great Cleveland Browns of all time. Number 3, you could argue, is Mr. Cleveland Brown. He is the Cleveland Browns, you could argue, and that was Lou Groza, the golden toe, if you will. He was both a great premier left tackle and offensive lineman in his time, and one of their true gold standards of kicking at that time, especially in the era of the old straight-ahead kickers. He spent a total of 22 seasons with the Cleveland Browns, his entire career. He was the last original Cleveland Brown, going back to that 1946 team that played, in the old AAFC. This was a guy that was undrafted out of Ohio State that ended up becoming, like I said, you could argue the epitome of the Cleveland Browns, the ultimate face of the franchise. And during his 22 seasons as an offensive lineman and as a kicker, you're talking about a 9-time Pro Bowler, a 4-time first-team All-Pro, a member of the 1950s NFL All-Decade Team, a member of the NFL's 50th anniversary team, a guy that was a part of 4 AAFC championship teams, a guy that was a part of 4 NFL championship teams. So think about that. A total of 8 world championships, if you will, during his career. And he was an instrumental part of that. Whether it be as an offensive lineman and being one of the best offensive linemen of his time, or being a kicker and being arguably the best kicker of his time for many years. Lou Groza is the Cleveland Browns as much as any other player is, but still only number 3 on this list, and that's impressive. Number 2. Now we get to number 2, and this is where I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with me, and that's fine. I'm not here to sit there and tell you you're wrong, because frankly, with 1 or 2, I think depending on your perspective and the arguments you can or want to make, you can put either guy in either spot. But number 2, I've actually got Jim Brown, the 6th overall selection out of Syracuse in the 1957 NFL Draft. A fullback in his 9 seasons that made the Pro Bowl every single year that he played, was a 6-time first-team All-Pro, an 8-time league leader in rushing yards, a 7-time he went over 1,000 yards rushing, including 3 seasons where he went over 1,500 rushing yards, which again, think about how great that was as a fullback, 1, and then 2 at a time where you were playing 12, 14 games every year. He was a 5-time league leader in rushing touchdowns. He retired as the all-time leader in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and total touchdowns. A 3-time NFL Most Valuable Player, a member of that Cleveland Browns 1964 NFL Championship team, a member of the 1960s NFL All-Decade Team, a member of the NFL's 50th and 75th anniversary team, a first ballot Hall of Famer in 1971, when in that time, players that retired, you didn't get a whole lot of them at that time because of all the players from all the years before when the Hall of Fame was starting. Not a lot of them ended up being first ballot Hall of Famers. Well, wouldn't you know, Jim Brown sure the hell was. And he's widely viewed as the greatest ball carrier of all time, and a lot of people still to this day view him as the most dominant and greatest football player in the history of the National Football League. And there is no question that in most other organizations, he's clearly the greatest player in the organization's history. And there's no doubt that you could make a very, very compelling case and a very, very strong argument to me and a lot of other people that Jim Brown is the greatest, Cleveland Brown of all time. But I personally don't view him as that. He was a tremendous player. He was a dominant player. He is the gold standard of NFL fullbacks, still to this day, always has been and always will be. But that doesn't make him the greatest Cleveland Brown of all time. I think that honor goes to number 1, Automatic Otto Graham, the 4th overall selection out of Northwestern in the 1946 draft, who really, to me, was the Cleveland Browns, along with guys like Lou Groza. What Automatic Otto did was he brought credibility to that Browns organization. He really was the reason that the Cleveland Browns were able to eventually make the leap from the AAFC and join the NFL. Automatic Otto in his time, a 5-time Pro Bowler, a 7-time first-team All-Pro between the AAFC and the NFL. Every season that Otto Graham played in the National Football League and the AAFC between 1946 and 1955, a total of 10 seasons, he led his team to a championship game every single year. That is part of the reason I look at him as the greatest Cleveland Brown of all time, whereas Jim Brown to me is only number two. Jim Brown was a great player and a tremendous player. But at the end of the day, you do play the game to win, and you play to ultimately have the chance to win championships and win championships. And Otto Graham did all of that in great abundance, viewed as one of the great cerebral minds at the quarterback position of all time. A dual threat quarterback that people often don't talk about, his ability to throw the ball at a time where not a lot of teams threw the ball a whole lot, but also a good scrambler that could cause some damage with his feet and do some big time games and some big moments, big spots, and big situations. A four-time AAFC champion, a three-time NFL champion. So think about it this way: out of the 10 seasons that he played, he led his team to a championship game each and every single time. Each and every single time. And 7 out of those 10 times, his team won that world championship. Phenomenal. Just think about that. A two-time AAFC MVP, a three-time NFL MVP, a member of the NFL's 1950s All-Decade Team, a member of the NFL's 75th Anniversary Team, a four-time league leader in completion percentage, a five-time leader in passing yards, a three-time leader in touchdown passes, a four-time leader in quarterback rating. In fact, he set a quarterback rating mark that it took almost 40 years for a Joe Montana to come along and break. He was a member of the 1965 Pro Football Hall of Fame class. When I look at Otto Graham, you're talking about one of the truly great quarterbacks in the history of the National Football League when you look at his relevant dominance against his peers and what he was able to accomplish in the time that he played. You look at all the records that he had and that he retired with as a quarterback. Furthermore, you look at every single year that he was a starting quarterback in the National Football League. His Cleveland Browns team played in a world championship game, and they won 7 out of those 10 world championship games. Jim Brown won one world championship during his time. And at the end of the day, when it all comes to pass, as great of a player as Jim Brown was, I think automatic Otto Graham was the greatest Cleveland Brown in the history of the organization. So go ahead, poo-poo me down below if you don't agree with me. If you want to blast me for putting Otto Graham above Jim Brown, you're more entitled to and do that. But I have my reasons, I have my views, I have my opinions on why I think, again, that Jim Brown is the second greatest Cleveland Brown ever and that Otto Graham is the greatest player in the history of the Cleveland Browns organization. Let me know what you think down below.